I think you have to look at what Gein did as a mark that he was mentally disturbed. The fact that he killed one person, or perhaps two or more persons in itself, I do not think is anything of great import regarding Gein's mental disorder, but how he lived. He thought how he wanted to return to being a child in his mother's arms, and how he tried to recreate his mother with the bodies that he dug up. These are signs of mental disorder, very unusual signs of mental disorder. Dr. Edward F. Schubert. Well, welcome back to a Dead Squirrel in the Woods Productions Paranormal Playground. We are your hosts, the Phantom Pals, Nick and Leah. This is part 3 of Ed Gein. This kind of is taking a life of its own now. So we have our drinks.
It's still kind of my fault because I keep talking about it.
And that's okay.
Drinks.
And
we're still chilling with the old-fashioned because it's a Wisconsin's first. So we're going to do the old-fashioned while we're talking about the Wisconsin non-serial killer. I'm not calling him that.
And we just talked about where Ed murdered Bernice Worden. Well, at this time, Plainfield, or actually Waushara County, had a freshly new elected sheriff.
Yes.
He did not have a lot of experience dealing with these issues, so
You're in Plainfield.
This will become a challenge for him.
Right.
So around this time, we mentioned that he bought the antifreeze. He had the bullet with him, right?
Right. He already had the bullet in his pocket.
So now, when Frank showed up from deer hunting, Frank suspected Gein right away.
Correct.
In his words, he says he's been hanging around here a lot lately, bothering my mother to go roller skating and dancing into movie shows. So that kind of stuck in his head. The fact that a sales receipt for Ed Gein for antifreeze was still on the counter did not help his cause.
Right.
Because everybody was deer hunting. It was the first day of deer hunting.
And Ed Gein really didn't hunt because, again, we're back to the animal thing where he didn't want to hurt the animals.
So they go out to his house and, well, when they do go into the house, do we have a list of what they found?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, there's got to be a list.
And we can talk about the list and like the
later.
Things that they found. But I will say, again, I'm bringing up the whole idea of search. Like, did they have the proper reasons to go into his shed? Okay. However, there was an argument from that in court. 2 questions were raised in the case. First was the entry and the consequent discovery by the officer for a search and seizure, and therefore subject to the constitutional provision that both the United States and Wisconsin constitutions. And second, if the entry and observation of the body is properly dominated as a search and seizure, was it lawful? So, officer clearly indicated that after an officer's entry into the shed, it did not require a search in the traditional use of the word to find Miss Worden's body. It required no rummaging about the effects of the defendant to discover the body.
Okay.
When you look at the opinion of Justice Douglas in Worden versus Hayden in another case, I mean, I could go through the whole thing, which is 1967 U.S. 294-87.
With our background in paralegal, we could...
Right, we can keep
going. We could
have
had a huge search and given you many different cases.
Right. Is subject that the question of whether or not the mere observation of persons are properly dominated in a search has never been specifically resolved in the United States Supreme Court. There is a theory that even though there is a trespass, the Fourth Amendment does not automatically apply to the evidence obtained by sound or sight. So in the end, was it lawful? Yes, it was deemed lawful. They did not have to move anything. There wasn't necessarily a search. The door was unlocked.
Okay.
And they were trying to find Ed to discuss the disappearance and possible murder of Miss Warden.
So what they found then was admissible to use because it was an unlocked door. So
right. So yes, it was lawful. It's still a little sketchy in my eyes, but
it is.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
In the end, was it wrong? No, like they found a dead body hanging from a rafter. They probably needed to find that. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty.
So now at this point, they find all this stuff, and I would assume a warrant was issued for his arrest.
Well, he was actually found that day, that evening. He was having lunch or dinner with his friend, Mr. Lester Hill.
And that was on the 17th. He was taken into custody.
Oh, I'm sorry, the next day. Yeah, you're right, the next day.
Okay, yeah, that was the 17th. So it's the day before my birthday that he was taken into custody.
Yep, so Ed was enjoying a pork chop dinner with his friend, Mr. Hill, when police rolled up at Mr. Hill's driveway and took Ed into custody.
He would watch a certain TV show there, too. I can't remember what it was, but I think it was I Love Lucy or something.
That would be new information.
Yeah, it was.
Teach me.
It was in the book that I'm going to let you borrow to read too. So you're gonna read it. But he had a show that they would watch together, and they didn't really think Ed was dangerous. So I'm sure this
was shocking
when he was arrested at their home.
Right. Now, say you know Ed and you were friends with him, and you're saying you're having dinner with him, watching TV, and the police show up, and you find out he killed somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like, weird friendship. All right.
That's not something you want to find out about.
Right.
So
November 18th, Ed actually confessed to killing Miss Hogan and Miss Warden.
So now that is the big event that happened when I was born.
Correct.
Around the day I was born. Not the year, but the date.
Right.
The day of the month.
Yep. An autopsy had shown that Warden, again, died to a single gunshot wound to the back of her head. Ed was 51 and arrested by Deputy Dan Chase.
Yes.
On the 22nd, just a few days later, he was taken before Judge Boyd Clark and charged with robbery. The murder charge was actually held back in order to determine sanity.
Now, at this point, the media is on full alert.
Yes.
Especially in Wisconsin. All across the country, we've never had anything like this. Keep in mind, though, at this time, all the stuff they found in his house, they didn't know about the grave robbing when the first stories came out.
Right.
So they thought he had killed like more than 10 people.
Right.
So this was like huge news. And the media did not do him any favors. They made him into a monster.
Yeah. Sadly.
Very sadly. Was he right? I mean, I don't know, but he wasn't right in the head. But pause. Okay, so at this time, the media is doing stories. This is going all over. You've got the Milwaukee Sentinel, Milwaukee Journal. They used to be two separate things.
Correct.
Yes, I'm aging myself at this point. I get it.
You're aging both of us because I remember that.
And there was the Chicago papers, the Associated Press, all that stuff was there. The sheriff hated this.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my God, this was his worst nightmare. he had been sheriff for 6 days, 7 days, I think, at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's got this national case. Very limited budget. Plainfield does not have money to, what do you call it? Do autopsies, do forensics on all of the stuff that's found isn't found in his place. So this is a very tough situation. And actually, when Leah said that, the murder charge was put off so they could investigate. As time goes, when they find out about more of the crimes further away and stuff that he might be possibly connected to, they think, the district attorney doesn't even care. He's like, you know what? We don't have the resources for that. That's their problem. That isn't our problem.
Right.
We can put him away on this. We don't need to spend a lot of money to do this. Now, at one point, the state does come in and save them, and a lot of the stuff is examined at UW, or not UW. Actually, yeah, it's in Madison. I think it's
Wisconsin State Crime Lab.
Yeah, Wisconsin State Crime Lab in UW, or in Madison.
So we'll go over, and I'm going to give much warning here because some of the stuff that we'll talk about is going to be pretty graphic. So we want to discuss what was actually found in Ed's house before we go into his psychological eval. Because again, the murder charge is being held up on investigation and on what the psychiatrists are saying about his evaluation. So we'll kind of dig into what was found and then his eval and kind of discuss the points between them. All right, so Bernice Warden's body was found in the woodshed and it was decapitated. She was hung upside down by ropes on her wrists with a crossbar at her ankles. The torso was dressed out like that of a deer. Her head was found in a burlap sack with nails hammered through each ear and tied together with twine, as if like he was going to hang the head up, almost like a trophy. Obviously, she was shot with that .22 caliber rifle, and the mutilations were performed after her death. Other things that they found in the home were 4 noses, whole human bones and fragments, 9 masks of human skin, bowls made from human skulls.
Which I would like to point out, skulls. They're glass, but they're skulls.
Yes. 2 female heads with the top sawed off. Human skin covering several chairs and seats. Mary Hogan's head in a paper bag. Bernice Warden's head was in the burlap sack. 9 vulvas in a shoebox.
Now, for people who haven't heard the term, I know what it is. What's a vulva?
Are we going there?
Yes, because people don't. That's not a term we use.
Do we want to go there? Like, do our listeners just want to go Google it? It's a female body part.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a good hint.
Yes.
Okay.
Female body part between the legs.
I just wanted that addressed because it kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, this might be tasteless, but Plainfield residents had a way of kind of dealing with this. They would tell jokes.
Okay.
This was their way to cope with it.
Yes.
So we talked about the stuff that's in Ed's house, right?
Yeah.
So I got a fun joke for you.
Oh, boy.
So why do they keep the heat on in Ed Gein's house?
Why?
So the furniture won't get goosebumps.
Oh, my God. Seriously, that is actually pretty good.
So okay, what did Ed Gein say to the sheriff who arrested him?
What?
Have a heart.
Nice. Which is funny because they found a heart in a frying pan on his stove.
Well, okay, awesome.
Right.
So now, this is kind of my coup de grace. This will be my last one.
Okay.
Until later, we'll finish with a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
Why did they let Ed Gein out of jail on New Year's Eve?
Why?
Gosh, I don't know what I want to say this one.
You started it too late.
Yeah, too late. I opened the can. So he could dig up a date.
That is nice.
So, that was their way of handling a very serious situation. Are some of those bad taste? Yes.
Possibly.
But at that time, that was their way.
Right.
So I did want to present that.
Well, interestingly enough, they also found some skulls on his bedpost. If they weren't real skulls, I would say cool, but real skulls on the bedpost.
He had shrunken heads because he had kids there. Yeah. And they found these shrunken heads, and they thought they were so cool.
Right. He said he got them from a friend.
And he was so proud of them himself.
Yeah.
So,
he had organs in the refrigerator, a pair of lips on a drawstring for a window shade, a belt made from female nipples. And that's like a pretty popular known one because that image has gone around for years. And then, of course, the lampshade made from human face. Oh. And then a quantity of formaldehyde and an embalming needle. Okay. So, interestingly enough, formaldehyde is preservation for body parts.
Yep.
So, kind of discussing a little further into his mind, when Gein told investigators that between 47 and 52, he made as many as 40 visits to the 3 local graveyards to exhume the recently buried bodies, as he was in a daze-like state.
Okay.
And on 30 of those visits, he came out of his daze while at the cemetery, left the grave in good order, and returned home empty-handed, like we said in last episode. He came to some sort of human consciousness and was like, I'm not going to do this.
Right.
So he actually didn't dig up bodies every single time he went out.
So now, during this whole time he's in jail, they're inspecting this house.
Yeah.
The media is not leaving them alone. They are flooding the courtrooms. They're at the house. They're at the jail. And making it very tough to do this. Like, they are under a major microscope right now.
Right.
At this moment.
Yeah. So they want to do things right.
So, yeah.
And we have to definitely look at Gein's competency, especially after admitting that after his mom had died, Gein wanted a sex change and began to create a woman's suit so he could pretend to be a female. And then he would put on the tan skin of women, described as an insane transvestite ritual. However, he denied having sex with any of the bodies.
Right.
And that they smelled too bad.
Yes.
But then he'll put them on.
Right. Well, he treated them, though, and he could...
But have you ever smelled formaldehyde? It's terrible. Okay. It's absolutely terrible.
Now, here is an example of him being questioned.
Sure.
So now, the question here, I'm going to say, questioner, do you have any recollection, Eddie, of taking any of those female parts, the vagina specifically, and holding it over your private part to cover your part? I edited part of it.
Yeah.
The answer, I believe that's true. Okay. So was he being let on there? I don't know. Okay, do you recall that with those vaginas of the bodies, or doing that with the vaginas of those bodies, that I believe I do remember, that's right. Would you ever put on a pair of women's panties over your body and then put some of those vaginas over the bleep?
Well, we're saying vaginas. You can go ahead and say penis.
Okay, penis. He said, and he said that could be. he seemed to want to please the questioners because he would deny the sexual acts. He used
Right.
that as an outside covering.
Right. And if we go through like how he was questioned, a lot of times it was, again, we're looking at the 1950s, so the questions were very leading.
Mm-hmm. Like with the stuff they found, I don't know that they knew how to question him even. So, and at this time, there was they thought that Victor Travis and that other hunter, they thought he was a disappearance for that. So all these other counties wanted to know how many people he killed. They didn't believe him when he said he was a grave robber.
Right.
So it took, this is what it took for them to believe him, believe it or not. They got orders to exhume to find out, and because this was a huge debate if they should even exhume the graves.
Right.
Finally, the DA, district attorney for Washura County, finally said, okay, we're going to do it. He was steadfast that they weren't going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when they actually had to dig the graves up, and they found out with two people, it took maybe an hour to get to the bottom of the grave. So they're like, you totally could have done this.
Yeah.
And then when they opened it, you could see right into the grave. The wood part was bent back.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's when they finally believed him.
And to go through those shrunken heads that you were talking about, for those who may not have known, now he's described that those are relics from the Philippines sent by a cousin who was serving in the war. However, those heads were actually facial skin carefully peeled from cadavers and then used as masks. So that's what he was showing to his like 16-year-old friend that he had.
So maybe he wanted to run a funeral home. I don't know.
I guess.
I don't
know. So in 1957, a psychologist and psychiatrist interviewed Ed and asserted that he was schizophrenic. So we actually have, thanks to Mr. Scott Bowser in his book Gein, that I'm getting my info from, we actually have a transcript of the actual psychology reports. And this was done at Central State Hospital. And this was done December 4th, 1957. And it's saying that on a superficial contact with the 51-year-old white male appears fairly well intact. However, closer observation and test results indicate otherwise. Missed speech on occasion, is rambling, his thinking is rather difficult to follow at times. No strong evidence of hallucinations and delusions were brought out in talking with him, since his explanations were rather vague. Concerning visions, his explanation referred to periods before he was born and had a rather bizarre trend to it. Physical complaints were verbalized and mentioned previously. This shows some hysteroid components, and tests are given some evidence of compulsion and phobic reactions.
Okay.
The patient is a very suggestible person who appears to be emotionally dull. Interesting notion there. Emotionally dull.
Kind of goes with the question I read.
Mm-hmm. Beneath this lies aggressiveness that is suppressed by inappropriate reactions that are followed by remorse and mild-manneredness. He's an immature person who withdraws and finds forming relationships with others difficult. He was rather rigid. Moral concepts which he expects others to follow. He is suspicious of others and tends to project blame for his own inadequacies onto others. His fantasy life is immature in nature, possibly pictures himself as much more adequate and bigger man than he is. Sexually, he is a conflicted individual and is functioning on an immature level. Guilt feelings are great, and repression is put into use quite frequently in this area. In general, it appears that this is basically a schizophrenic personality with several neurotic manifestations. At the present time, He is confused and has difficulty in looking at the situation realistically.
Okay. Um, so yeah, with that assessment, he was taken to Madison
Mm-hmm.
Crime Lab to uh, go under lie detector tests because they wanted to some of these unsolved cases, and this actually
Mm-hmm.
happened twice. And they said he was easy to work with. Um, he ever since he was arrested, he was eating like 3 good square meals a day.
Right.
By the time he was at his competency hearing, everybody noticed he'd become a little bit more chunky. So obviously, being in jail
Right.
was very good for his health at that point. Um,
Yeah. So in December of 1957, the judge actually received a packet from the Central State Hospital
mhm.
stating that Ed was insane and should be permanently committed to the hospital. And by January 6th of the following year, he had a sanity hearing in Wisconsin Rapids and was declared legally insane by
Mhm.
Judge Bundle. He was recommitted to the Central State Hospital.
And what happened there was basically his lawyer. He had a public defender, and he was actually a pretty good lawyer. He came. He told Ed, "We're going to plead not guilty due to insanity,"
Mm-hmm.
and he. So after all of his arraignments and finally being able to, go through the formalities, they had a hearing, and it was deemed that he should go to that hospital, the Central State Hospital, for evaluation for 30 days. And there were a bunch of evaluations on him
By many,
by many.
because
And
psychologists from around the world were attempting to find out more about Ed because during the 1950s, he gained this notoriety and became like this most famous documented case involving the combination of necrophilia,
yep,
fetishism, and transvestism.
and I'm
So
trying to find the
it's like
assessment here.
it was amazing to find somebody of this nature. So psychologists who have like not come across this wanted to interview, assess, document as much about him as they could.
So on December 13th, the day after Schubert's second interview,
Mm-hmm.
then they kind of went over his basically family background. And it says here the subject is introverted, odd, withdrawn personality that has had difficulty relating closely to other people. He has shown some paranoid trends, but on the other hand, he may have been duped and unfairly used on some occasions as he speaks of doing work from other farmers and failing to be paid for his labor.
Yeah, we
He
talked
is
about that.
he is passive,
Right.
inhibited, and somewhat evasive when questioned about the offense, and may harbor deep-seated feelings of hostility.
Right.
So, and he denies having um, any sexual acts with the stuff. Then he had that he read his final assessment.
Mm-hmm.
They bring up his mom's death in 1945 as a trigger. So the media during this time, though, before he goes to there, they are demanding interviews with Ed
Right. He almost had like a celebrity status.
overnight. And so this became a point of contention. None of them ever got an interview with him. The media was very callous about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes there. And when this happens, the town of Plainfield, the residents are very upset.
Right.
That's more for the fact that, and I can see their point of view. Basically, they think he's going to get off. He's not going to face any punishment.
I guess it depends on what you think punishment is, because he did spend 30 days in the mental institution and was evaluated as mentally incompetent,
Mm-hmm.
which meant that he could no longer be tried for the first
Right.
degree murder.
Exactly.
And population in Plainfield voiced their anger, saying that he's never going to be tried for Bernice Worden, and there was nothing that the community can do that can influence it, because again, he was mentally incompetent. Like, you can't charge them that.
So to this day, I'm sure that's part of the stigma of Plainfield and Ed Gein.
Right.
So his time at the Central Park, was it? Or
the mental institution,
the institution, Central State. He is a model. He's a model patient.
Right.
He's supposed to come back before Christmas. The sheriff's like, oh my gosh, I do not want this. No, I do not want to deal. I want the jail empty because I live on the other side of the jail.
Yeah.
I want the jail empty for me and my family on Christmas. I do not need this circus outside our house.
Right.
So the institution's fine with it. They just have to get an order from the judge, and the judge is fine with it. Right. So he gets his wish.
Yeah.
And then that's when he comes back, and on that January 6th is when he's declared mentally incompetent. And he lives the rest of his days out in the criminally insane.
Right. Well, hospital. It was January 22nd.
Oh, January 22nd?
Yep. And that was 10 years after he was placed in state, because the courts were deciding that Gein was finally competent enough to stand trial because he did so well in Central State. But right after the courts and him going and spending 30 days for his initial period, they went to his farm and set it up for auction for some of his belongings. However, right before the auction, I think it was like 2 weeks before the auction, his farm was burned to the ground by a mysterious fire.
I wonder what happened.
Dun, 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 right?
And we were there, and now there's trees planted where the house was.
Right. And a lot of people were actually pointing the finger at fire warden Frank Worden, because he just didn't investigate it. Yeah. It was kind of like, oh, yay, his house is gone.
It's an eyesore gone. We don't want to have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Maybe people will stop coming out here.
So they definitely thought that Mr. Frank Worden did it, and then the investigation never happened. However, when Ed found out that his home was burned, he just simply shrugged his shoulders and was quoted saying, just as well. Everything from the fire ended up being auctioned off at the end of March of 58, and his Ed's Ford sedan that he was used to haul the bodies was sold at public auction at $760 to a carnival sideshow. And then Gibbons was the owner of the sideshow. He charged 25 cents for people to see it. The blue pickup.
They called it the ghoul car.
The ghoul car?
Yeah.
Nice. The pickup that he had was also sold $215 to a Chet Seals for Chet's wrecker service. And then, again, 10 years he spent at Central State. Court decided that he was able to stand trial, and proceedings began, as you stated, in January 1968, to determine whether Ed was guilty or not guilty by reason of insanity for the murder of Bernice Worden. So he did end up standing trial.
Yes. He did not get out of it, but it
was 10 years later.
Yeah.
Gein had 7 witnesses that took the stand. Several of those testified were lab technicians who performed the autopsy of Bernice Worden, and then evidence was heavily stacked against Gein. And 1 week later, the judge actually hit the verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. However, he was found guilty of first-degree murder.
Okay.
But again, he was insane at the time of the killing, therefore found not guilty by reason of insanity, and he was acquitted.
But he was taken back to the Central.
Right. After the trial, he ended up being escorted back to Central State Hospital. Even though he was acquitted, he still had that insanity side of it. So therefore, the families of both Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan just really felt like justice was never served. They believed that Gein escaped punishment, and there was nothing more they can do to reverse the court's decision.
And again,
This is kind of where I want to stop a little bit and just kind of go back and think about this. From a victim standpoint, your family member, your loved one was killed by somebody. You want to see justice. But finding out that that person was insane, clinically insane, at the time of the killing, how do you go about that as a victim or a family member of the victim?
Yeah, that's got to be tough.
Right.
Because that goes to the question, what is justice at that point?
Right.
Depends on who you are.
Yeah.
I mean, I can totally understand where they want him to be held accountable.
Yeah.
But I also understand the other side where, you know, he might have known what he was doing. He might have been in another world.
And I don't know if he actually even knew what he was doing, because he talked a lot about like the stay state. He spent all that time alone in his home without any persons that are seeing him and going, there's something wrong. So there was never a model person to be there and understand that something wasn't right. He did spend the rest of his life in a hospital.
Yeah. So
he remained at the mental institution for the rest of his life, and he spent his days happy and comfortably. He developed an interest in ham radios that had been permitted to use with the money he earned. He was a reader. He had his regular chats with staff psychologists and enjoyed doing like handicraft work he was assigned. He did like stone polishing, rug making, just types of occupational therapy. However, he did file a petition in 1974. So quite some time after he was found guilty and then acquitted, asking that he's now recovered from his mental illness and was fully competent and wanted to be released to live out the rest of his days in the community. That order was reviewed and they did a re-examination. However, the judge did end up rejecting the petition, and he was returned back to the hospital when he was 68 years old. And then at the end of his life, when he was 72, he ended up moving to the Mendota Mental Institute in Madison. And that's where he ended up dying from respiratory failure. And then quickly, the day after he died, he was brought back to Plainfield quietly and was buried in a blue casket between his mother and brother.
Interesting thing with that, his gravestone no longer is there.
It's not, no.
Because people kept taking it.
Yeah.
If you go to the family gravesite, Augusta's gravestone is chipped really bad.
It is, yeah. It's sad.
And I'm thinking that's people taking mementos of her gravestone.
Right.
Which I think is very disrespectful. No matter how bad of a person she was or tyrant she was, let the dead rest.
Right. But they kept vandalizing his, and somebody ended up taking it, right? Like somebody's holding it in a basement somewhere, like I think in a chiropractor's office or something.
I don't know.
It's somewhere.
It's a mystery for us.
Right.
The right people know where.
Right. There's no plans to put it back or anything like that. But when we did look at the site, it was noticed that where his headstone would have been, there's like a hole as people kind of dig the dirt.
And we will have those pictures up. I will scour the internet for pictures with the gravestone in place too, as well.
Yeah. And to say that he died from respiratory failure from a battle with cancer and then had grown senile, that's odd, because you were not normal, then you became schizophrenic and had all these other issues. Then you became competent enough to just kind of be in a normal situation, and then you grow old and you get that old senile thing. Like, how much does a brain have to go
Yeah.
through in a lifetime?
He had a very rough life. I mean,
Yeah.
he I don't think he had a chance from the get go with Augusta.
No, I don't think so. And I kind of wanted to bring up this really cool tool that we have now. Um, it's called the Adverse Childhood
Oh,
Experiences.
okay. We'll put a link to that in the.
Right.
We
So
can
we're
put a
going to do
link
like
to
an ACE
that as
test.
well.
So it's like the ACE score is pretty much saying the type of things that you have seen in your childhood or been through, and how that can rewire your brain due to trauma effects.
Okay.
So here is his scores. So, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? I would say for Ed, yes. He was humiliated, he was put down, he was insulted.
Yeah, made a friend.
Right.
He would be.
Was told he would turn out to be like his dad, and things like that. Did a parent or other adult in the household often push, grab, slap, throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks where you were injured? There was physical abuse from Augusta. I don't know if he was pushed or thrown or anything like that. However, he did talk a lot about falling downstairs, or was about to fall downstairs, and his mom grabbed him and saved him. Where another story is saying that she pushed him and then grabbed him. He saw it as my mother, my savior. But was that more manipulative to make him feel that way after she pushed him?
That might, yeah.
So again, there was some physical abuse in the home. Did an adult or a person at least 5 years older touch, fondle their body in a sexual way, attempt to have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse? We don't have any evidence saying that he was sexually assaulted in the home.
With Augusta's views, I doubt that.
Yeah. So
that would not go with Augusta's.
Right. I don't know if he was ever assaulted. I would say no to that question.
Yeah.
Did he often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? Your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? I don't feel like the family supported each other at all. Mom hated dad, made that very clear. Dad disliked mom as he beat her every time he was drunk.
Yeah, but she disliked him just as much because she would send insults his way as he was beating her.
Right.
So
I don't think the family was very close to each other.
No.
However, Ed and mom were incredibly close. So this question makes me go both ways. The family wasn't close, but he was close to mom. And he actually had a childhood of being close to his brother.
Yep.
Until the end.
Till the end, when his brother kind of.
So I'm kind of going like a no on this one.
Yeah.
This could be like a border one. Did he often feel that he didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect him, or your parents were too high or drunk to take care of you? I don't think so.
No.
I mean, it seemed like he had
George
clothes.
might have been too drunk, but other than that, he had his mom.
did take care of them. Yeah. Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Should have been. But
I think they did more damage to him by sticking around each other.
Was your parent or caregiver often pushed, slapped by, or had something thrown at them, or sometimes often, very often kicked, bitten, hit? So I would say yes, because he saw the domestic violence between his parents. Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker? Yes. We knew that. Was the household member depressed or mentally ill? Did a household member attempt suicide? I would say for sure dad was likely depressed.
Yes.
And while mom may not have been diagnosed, so we can't really say that she was mentally ill, there was definitely something wrong in her viewpoints and thinking. Something was up. However, I would say dad was definitely had a depression.
Mm-hmm.
And then did a household member go to prison? I don't believe any of them did.
No.
So his ACE score was get on me. So far we got a 5 out of 10 with 2 quizzitive ones were right. I wasn't sure which way to go. So he could have been as far as a 7 out of 10.
So
of a higher ACE score, even a 5 out of 10 is still higher.
Yeah.
He witnessed a lot.
So some of those were borderline.
Right.
And the ones that are in there, how did it affect him?
Right.
So
that was a fun episode. I do love discussing brain patterns.
I think we covered Ed Gein pretty thoroughly.
I thought so.
I think that's our last segment on him.
Yeah. It was enjoyable.
It was.
You can't get me to shut up on the subject if you ever want to talk about him some more.
No, so if there's anything you ever want us to cover, we do have a Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
So you can interact with us on there. And of course, remember to subscribe so that you get the next episodes. And we'll see where we go from this next.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe Poe. Let's go to a writer, some macabre stuff.
Definitely, that would be fun.
Yeah. So thank you for listening. And this has been a production of Dead Squirrel in the Woods. And we are your hosts, Nick and Leah. I hope you enjoyed it.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.